They laughed again. Japanese pilots, veterans of Pearl Harbor and the Solomons, pointed to the hulking new American bomber and sneered. To them, the SB2C Helldiver was a monster stitched together without grace. Bloated fuselage, heavy wings, ungainly lines. Too clumsy to strike, too ugly to survive, they said. In their eyes, it was another coffin, another joke in aluminum. But like all jokes in war, the laughter would not last. From a distance, the Helldiver was no hawk. It lumbered into the sky with the awkwardness of a creature unsure of its wings. Even American crews cursed it, giving it the nickname the Beast. It was harder to fly than the Dauntless, dangerous to land on carriers, prone to stalls and mishaps. And yet, for all its flaws, it carried something new. Bigger bombs, longer range, the weight of an industrial empire determined to smash its way across the Pacific. Step closer. On the decks of carriers in 1944, young pilots strapped themselves into cockpits, muttering about the machine that bucked under their control. Mechanics checked bolts, praying they would hold. Above the ocean, the Helldiver's shadow stretched wide, its bomb bay capable of carrying 2,000 pounds of destruction. It might not have been loved, but it was feared. Closer still, imagine the view through a gunner's eyes as the Helldiver tipped into its dive. The ocean tilted, the horizon vanished, and gravity gripped like a vice. Dive brakes howled, bombs armed, the target below filling the canopy. Ugly or not, graceful or not, the Helldiver was about to deliver ruin. Here lies the irony. Japan laughed at the Dauntless until Midway silenced them. They laughed at the Helldiver too, not realizing that ugliness hides power. In 1944 and 1945, this beast would descend upon convoys, carriers, and fortresses with merciless precision. It would strike Truk Lagoon, smash Japanese shipping, and hurl bombs onto the last defenses of Okinawa. The very machine mocked as unworthy became the sound of empire collapsing. This story is not one of beauty. It is one of brute force, of flawed machines wielded by determined men. It is the story of how the Helldiver, scorned by friend and foe alike, became a weapon that crushed Japan's last hopes in the Pacific. Stay with us as we enter this journey. Subscribe to our channel because what follows is not just a history of steel and wings, it is a drama of arrogance, resilience, and a beast that, despite every curse, carried America to victory. The island was a speck in the Pacific, Tarawa little more than coral and palm, yet guarded by bunkers and barbed wire as if it were Tokyo itself. In November 1943, America hurled itself against this fortress. Marines waded ashore into water red with blood, caught in crossfire from Japanese pillboxes. It was here, above this killing ground, that the SB2C Helldiver first announced itself. From the decks of carriers Essex and Bunker Hill, the new bombers lined up. Pilots muttered curses, their hands sweaty on throttles. They had trained on the Helldiver long enough to know its temper. It stalled without warning, it shuddered on takeoff, it fought against its pilot on landing. To many, it was less an aircraft than a beast to be wrestled into obedience. But orders were clear. Tarawa had to fall, and the Helldiver was now the Navy's primary dive bomber. Japanese defenders scoffed when they first glimpsed it. Through binoculars they saw the bulkier frame, the heavy silhouette, and sneered as they had at the Dauntless before. To them, this was just another American mistake, an overweight clunker that would tumble into the sea. They did not yet realize that the beast carried double the payload of its predecessor. At dawn, the squadrons roared off the carrier decks. Engines strained, wings flexed, the Helldivers lumbering upward like reluctant giants. Over Tarawa, the sky boiled with anti-aircraft fire. Black puffs dotted the air, shrapnel rattling against fuselages. Pilots clenched teeth, gunners braced, and then the dives began. Imagine the descent. Bomb bay doors yawning open, the nose pitching down, dive brakes screaming like tortured metal. The ocean turned vertical, the target a tiny dot swelling into a fortress. In seconds the bomb was away. 1,000-pounders fell onto bunkers, erupting in fountains of sand and fire. Concrete shattered, pillboxes split apart. Marines pinned on the beaches looked upward and cheered. The Helldiver's presence at Tarawa was not flawless. Many crews struggled with handling, some crashes claimed lives, and carrier landings grew infamous for broken gear and torn fuselages. Yet its bombs made a difference. The sheer weight of destruction it delivered cracked open defenses that would have cost countless more Marines their lives. Reporters embedded with the fleet sent back vivid words. The new bomber dives like a beast, but when it strikes, the island shakes. That phrase, like a beast, would stick. Sailors began using it with grim humor. The Helldiver was cursed for its flaws but feared for its bite. Japanese survivors of Tarawa later admitted that the Helldiver's bombing was relentless. Unlike the Dauntless, which came in smaller groups, the Helldivers arrived in massed formations, saturating the island with explosives. One officer described it bitterly: "The beast came and there was no place to hide." By the battle's end, Tarawa was a graveyard. Thousands of Japanese defenders lay dead, their bunkers smashed, their guns silenced. American losses were horrific too, over 1,000 Marines killed in 3 days. But without the Helldiver's bombardment, it would have been worse. For the first time, the ugly beast had proven its worth in the crucible of combat. Yet the controversy did not end. Many pilots returned furious, cursing the aircraft for its dangerous quirks. Some even begged to be reassigned to Avengers or kept Dauntless instead. But the war machine of America was rolling, and the Helldiver, flawed or not, would not be stopped. Production lines in the United States churned out thousands more. The beast was here to stay. Tarawa had been a baptism by fire. And though cursed, mocked, and doubted, the Helldiver had shown one truth: when it dove, islands burned. February 1944. The Pacific sky above Truk Lagoon darkened not with clouds but with wings. Operation Hailstone had begun, a massive American strike against Japan's fortress in Micronesia, the so-called Gibraltar of the Pacific. For years, the Japanese Navy had stockpiled ships, fuel, and aircraft here, convinced it was impregnable. Yet when the Helldivers came, all that confidence would turn to smoke. From carriers Essex, Bunker Hill, Yorktown, and others, waves of SB2C Helldivers launched. Deck crews worked with machine-like rhythm, fueling, arming, and pushing squadrons skyward. To onlookers, the sight was staggering: dozens of the ungainly bombers lumbering into formation. Japanese spotters, glimpsing them, once again sneered, "Clumsy birds. Easy prey." But they underestimated not just the aircraft but the force behind them. Inside the cockpits, pilots wrestled the beast as always. The Helldiver demanded obedience. Mishandle the throttle and it shuddered, flare too late on landing and it crumpled. Yet in the dive it came alive. As the squadrons reached Truk, the order came: attack. The lagoon below teemed with targets: cruisers, destroyers, merchant vessels, tankers. Japanese sailors scrambled, anti-aircraft guns blazing. The first Helldivers tipped forward, wings trembling as dive brakes snapped open. Then came the howl, the metallic shriek that meant death was falling. One bomb struck a transport, splitting it in half. Another detonated amid a fuel depot, a fireball rising so high it painted the sky. A cruiser tried to maneuver, but the dives were merciless. Helldivers peeled off one after another, each releasing its payload with brutal precision. Within hours, ships were sinking in every corner of the lagoon. Marine observers later described the scene as apocalyptic. Flames rolled across the water, wrecks capsized, ammunition stores exploded in chain reactions. Japanese pilots scrambled Zeros to intercept, but they were overwhelmed. American Hellcats cut them down, clearing the skies for the beast to dive again and again. Reporters who later toured the ruins called it Japan's Pearl Harbor in reverse. The comparison was apartment. Just as America had reeled from December 7th, now Japan staggered from February 17th. The difference was scale. Truk was not merely damaged, it was gutted. Over 40 ships destroyed or crippled, hundreds of aircraft annihilated, fuel reserves gone. The Helldiver, mocked at its birth, had become the executioner. Its 2,000-pound payload shattered docks, airstrips, and barracks. One Japanese officer, captured later, admitted with bitterness, "We thought them clumsy. But clumsy hammers can smash empires." His words echoed the lesson already written at Midway by the Dauntless. For the crews, the mission was vindication. Many had cursed the beast for its handling quirks, but at Truk, its strengths shone. Heavy payload, long reach, precision in the dive, it was everything the operation demanded. Even skeptics admitted that, despite its flaws, the Helldiver delivered destruction no other dive bomber could match. And the symbolism mattered. Truk had been a jewel of Japanese power, a hub where fleets gathered before striking across the Pacific. Its loss stunned Tokyo. Strategists admitted privately that their forward defense line had been shattered. Without Truk, Japan's naval mobility was crippled. For America, Operation Hailstone was proof that the war machine was unstoppable. Factories back home churned out Helldivers in the thousands. Pilots might still grumble, but they flew them into battle knowing that behind every mission stood the full weight of American industry. Japan laughed at the beast. America mass-produced it until the laughter died. By the battle's end, the lagoon was littered with wrecks, twisted steel now resting beneath turquoise waters. Today divers call it a ghost fleet, a time capsule of destruction. But in 1944, it was a symbol. The beast had roared and an empire trembled. Operation Hailstone showed that the SB2C Helldiver was no joke. It was a blunt instrument, yes, but in the Pacific, blunt instruments were what shattered illusions. From Tarawa to Truk, the beast had proven its bite. Ahead still lay the Marianas and the Philippines, where the beast would dive again into fire and glory. The summer of 1944 brought the Americans to the Marianas. Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, 3 stepping stones toward the heart of Japan. To defend them, the Japanese Navy mustered its remaining carriers, hoping for one last decisive strike. What followed became legend, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, remembered as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. And among the wings that darkened the sky was the SB2C Helldiver. On the morning of June 19, carrier decks buzzed with urgency. Pilots briefed, gunners checked ammunition belts, mechanics loaded bombs into yawning bays. The Helldiver squadrons cursed under their breath. Many would rather have flown the Dauntless or Avengers, but this was the beast's war now. And though ugly, though mistrusted, it carried the heavy payloads that the coming battle demanded. As the fleet steamed west, scouts reported enemy carriers approaching. The Japanese launched wave after wave of planes, Zeros, Judas, and Kates, hurling themselves at the American fleet. But by now the skies belonged to the Hellcat. American fighters cut through the attackers, shooting down hundreds. In the confusion, the stage was set for the Helldivers to strike back. Imagine the scene from above. Squadrons of Helldivers clawing through clouds, guided by radio chatter and the glint of sunlight on ocean. Below, Japanese carriers maneuvered desperately, their decks crowded with aircraft refueling and rearming. The pilots knew this was Midway all over again, a chance to gut Japan's naval air arm in a single blow. At 15,000 feet, the first Helldiver squadrons rolled into their dives. Nose pitched downward, dive brakes screamed, cockpits rattled as airspeed climbed past 250 knots. Bomb bay doors opened, shadows fell across decks. A 1,000-pound bomb crashed through the flight deck of Hyo, igniting fuel lines. Flames leapt skyward, men ran in terror, ammunition erupted in chain reactions. Moments later, a second strike tore into Zuikaku, one of the last survivors of Pearl Harbor. Reports from gunners described chaos below, crews pushing burning aircraft overboard, sailors leaping into the sea, decks buckling under repeated hits. Helldivers dove in pairs and trios, relentless, while Avengers launched torpedoes from sea level. It was a symphony of destruction, orchestrated by America's overwhelming numbers. The Japanese tried to respond, but their pilots were shadows of the elite who had once ruled the skies. Poorly trained, rushed into combat, they fell by the dozens. American aviators compared it to shooting turkeys in a pen, thus the infamous nickname. Over 300 Japanese planes were destroyed in a single day, while American losses were minimal. And still the Helldivers pressed the attack. Carriers that survived the bomb hits found themselves crippled, unable to launch planes. Fuel reserves burned, hangars collapsed. The once proud Japanese Navy, which had dreamed of another Pearl Harbor, found itself reduced to wreckage. For the Americans, the battle was vindication of doctrine. Carrier power, dive bombers, and overwhelming production had finally crushed Japan's naval air wing. Never again would the Japanese mount a serious carrier offensive. From this point, they were on the defensive, unable to replace lost pilots, unable to match American industry. But the story of the Helldiver in the Marianas was not just numbers, it was also redemption. Pilots who had cursed the beast admitted grudging respect. Its heavy bombs struck with precision, its range allowed deep strikes, its rugged frame endured flak. A Marine on Saipan later wrote in his diary, "When the Helldivers came, the ground shook. We called them monsters, but we were glad they were ours." Japanese survivors remembered it differently. For them, the scream of dive brakes heralded disaster. A Zero pilot captured after the battle described watching helplessly as Helldivers plunged. They were ugly, but they fell like fate. We laughed at them once. We do not laugh now. By the end of June 20th, the Marianas were secure. The U.S. had annihilated the bulk of Japan's naval aviation, sunk multiple carriers, and cleared the path to the Philippines. And in the headlines back home, the Helldiver, mocked as dangerous to fly, was hailed as a destroyer of fleets. The irony was complete. What pilots called a beast, what enemies called clumsy, had become the hammer that pounded the final nails into Japan's coffin. The Marianas battle proved that ugliness mattered little when bombs found their mark. And once again, Japanese laughter had died in the roar of fire. Ahead lay the Philippines, Leyte Gulf, and Okinawa, the final stages of the Pacific War. And the beast would be there too, diving through storms of flak, delivering the blows that ground an empire into dust. By late 1944, the Pacific had become an American tide, rolling westward with unstoppable momentum. The Philippines stood next, and with it, the largest naval battle the world had ever seen, Leyte Gulf. For the SB2C Helldiver, it was both a trial and a showcase, a chance to prove its worth in the greatest clash of fleets in history. October 1944. Carriers of Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet launched strike after strike. Among them, Helldivers surged skyward, bomb bays packed with 1,000-pounders. Pilots gritted teeth, gunners tightened belts, mechanics whispered prayers. They cursed the beast's quirks but trusted its payload. Over the waters of Leyte, the stage was set. The Japanese brought everything they had: 4 carrier groups, battleships including Yamato and Musashi, and swarms of aircraft. Their plan was ambitious: lure Halsey north, smash American landing forces in the center, and reclaim the initiative. But ambition could not mask weakness. And the symbolism mattered. Truk had been a jewel of Japanese power, a hub where fleets gathered before striking across the Pacific. Its loss stunned Tokyo. Strategists admitted privately that their forward defense line had been shattered. Without Truk, Japan's naval mobility was crippled. For America, Operation Hailstone was proof that the war machine was unstoppable. Factories back home churned out Helldivers in the thousands. Pilots might still grumble, but they flew them into battle knowing that behind every mission stood the full weight of American industry. Japan laughed at the beast. America mass-produced it until the laughter died. By the battle's end, the lagoon was littered with wrecks, twisted steel now resting beneath turquoise waters. Today, divers call it a ghost fleet, a time capsule of destruction. But in 1944, it was a symbol. The beast had roared and an empire trembled. Operation Hailstone showed that the SB2C Helldiver was no joke. It was a blunt instrument, yes, but in the Pacific, blunt instruments were what shattered illusions. From Tarawa to Truk, the beast had proven its bite. Ahead still lay the Marianas and the Philippines, where the beast would dive again into fire and glory. The summer of 1944 brought the Americans to the Marianas. Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, 3 stepping stones toward the heart of Japan. To defend them, the Japanese Navy mustered its remaining carriers, hoping for one last decisive strike. What followed became legend: the Battle of the Philippine Sea, remembered as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. And among the wings that darkened the sky was the SB2C Helldiver. On the morning of June 19th, carrier decks buzzed with urgency. Pilots briefed, gunners checked ammunition belts, mechanics loaded bombs into yawning bays. The Helldiver squadrons cursed under their breath. Many would rather have flown the Dauntless or Avengers, but this was the beast's war now. And though ugly, though mistrusted, it carried the heavy payloads that the coming battle demanded. As the fleet steamed west, scouts reported enemy carriers approaching. The Japanese launched wave after wave of planes, Zeros, Judas, and Kates, hurling themselves at the American fleet. But by now the skies belonged to the Hellcat. American fighters cut through the attackers, shooting down hundreds. In the confusion, the stage was set for the Helldivers to strike back. Imagine the scene from above: squadrons of Helldivers clawing through clouds, guided by radio chatter and the glint of sunlight on ocean. Below, Japanese carriers maneuvered desperately, their decks crowded with aircraft refueling and rearming. The pilots knew this was Midway all over again, a chance to gut Japan's naval air arm in a single blow. At 15,000 feet, the first Helldiver squadrons rolled into their dives. Nose pitched downward, dive brakes screamed, Cockpits rattled as airspeed climbed past 250 knots. Bomb bay doors opened, shadows fell across decks. A 1,000-pound bomb crashed through the flight deck of Hyo, igniting fuel lines. Flames leapt skyward, men ran in terror, ammunition erupted in chain reactions. Moments later, a second strike tore into Zuikaku, one of the last survivors of Pearl Harbor. Reports from gunners described chaos below, crews pushing burning aircraft overboard, sailors leaping into the sea, decks buckling under repeated hits. Helldivers dove in pairs and trios, relentless, while Avengers launched torpedoes from sea level. It was a symphony of destruction, orchestrated by America's overwhelming numbers. The Japanese tried to respond, but their pilots were shadows of the elite who had once ruled the skies. Poorly trained, rushed into combat, they fell by the dozens. American aviators compared it to shooting turkeys in a pen, thus the infamous nickname. Over 300 Japanese planes were destroyed in a single day, while American losses were minimal. And still the Helldivers pressed the attack. Carriers that survived the bomb hits found themselves crippled, unable to launch planes. Fuel reserves burned, hangars collapsed. The once proud Japanese Navy, which had dreamed of another Pearl Harbor, found itself reduced to wreckage. For the Americans, the battle was vindication of doctrine. Carrier power, dive bombers, and overwhelming production had finally crushed Japan's naval air wing. Never again would the Japanese mount a serious carrier offensive. From this point, they were on the defensive, unable to replace lost pilots, unable to match American industry. But the story of the Helldiver in the Marianas was not just numbers, it was also redemption. Pilots who had cursed the beast admitted grudging respect. Its heavy bombs struck with precision, its range allowed deep strikes, its rugged frame endured flak. A Marine on Saipan later wrote in his diary, "When the Helldivers came, the ground shook. We called them monsters, but we were glad they were ours." Japanese survivors remembered it differently. For them, the scream of dive breaks heralded disaster. A Zero pilot captured after the battle described watching helplessly as Helldivers plunged. "They were ugly, but they fell like fate. We laughed at them once. We do not laugh now." By the end of June 20th, the Marianas were secure. The U.S. had annihilated the bulk of Japan's naval aviation, sunk multiple carriers, and cleared the path to the Philippines. And in the headlines back home, the Helldiver, mocked as dangerous to fly, was hailed as a destroyer of fleets. The irony was complete. What pilots called a beast, what enemies called clumsy, had become the hammer that pounded the final nails into Japan's coffin. The Marianas battle proved that ugliness mattered little when bombs found their mark. And once again, Japanese laughter had died in the roar of fire. Ahead lay the Philippines, Leyte Gulf, and Okinawa, the final stages of the Pacific War. And the beast would be there too, diving through storms of flak, delivering the blows that ground an empire into dust. By late 1944, the Pacific had become an American tide, rolling westward with unstoppable momentum. The Philippines stood next, and with it, the largest naval battle the world had ever seen, Leyte Gulf. For the SB2C Helldiver, it was both a trial and a showcase, a chance to prove its worth in the greatest clash of fleets in history. October 1944. Carriers of Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet launched strike after strike. Among them, Helldivers surged skyward, bomb bays packed with 1,000-pounders. Pilots gritted teeth, gunners tightened belts, mechanics whispered prayers. They cursed the beast's quirks but trusted its payload. Over the waters of Leyte, the stage was set. The Japanese brought everything they had: 4 carrier groups, battleships including Yamato and Musashi, and swarms of aircraft. Their plan was ambitious: lure Halsey north, smash American landing forces in the center, and reclaim the initiative. But ambition could not mask weakness. On October 24th, Helldivers from the Intrepid, Franklin, and Enterprise spotted Musashi, the largest battleship afloat, bristling with guns, her armor seemingly invulnerable. Yet even steel leviathans fear the sky. Squadron after squadron dove, bombs and torpedoes raining down. Helldivers plunged nearly vertically, releasing their loads against the giant's armored decks. Explosions blossomed across her hull. For hours the hammering continued. By evening Musashi shuddered, capsized, and sank beneath the sea beyond sea. The beast had helped slay a monster. The following days brought more chaos. At Samar, American escort carriers faced overwhelming Japanese battleships. Yet Helldivers and Avengers, flying from jeep carriers, dove with reckless courage, slamming bombs into cruisers and battleships. Japanese commanders, convinced they faced the full fleet, withdrew. Once again, dive bombers had turned the tide, not with elegance but with audacity. By Leyte's end, Japan's navy was shattered beyond repair. Carriers were sunk, battleships crippled, aircraft annihilated. It was the final gasp of Japan's naval power. And through it all, Helldivers had proved their brutal utility. They were no longer the untrusted newcomers. They were the heavy fists that hammered Japan's fleet into silence. But the war was not finished. In 1945, America closed in on Okinawa, the last stepping stone before Japan itself. If Tarawa was a baptism by fire, Okinawa was a descent into hell. The Japanese unleashed kamikazes in waves, hurling planes as living bombs against American ships. Carrier decks burned, destroyers sank, sailors died by the thousands. Amid this storm, Helldivers flew relentlessly, striking airfields, ships, and artillery that fed the suicide raids. Imagine the sky over Okinawa in April 1945. A blur of smoke trails, the roar of engines, the flash of explosions. Helldivers dived through flak and kamikaze swarms alike, releasing bombs on airstrips crowded with planes. Every destroyed runway meant fewer kamikazes reaching the fleet. Every burning hangar meant Marines ashore could breathe a little easier. It was brutal work. Losses mounted, and many crews never returned. Yet the beast endured. Its rugged frame absorbed punishment, its bombs tore apart fortifications that had resisted artillery. Marines called its presence salvation, the thunder above that cracked open caves and bunkers too stubborn for flame or shell. One Marine officer wrote, "We cursed the kamikaze by night, but by day we prayed for the Helldivers. When they dove, the island shook, and the enemy fell silent." The beast had earned a strange kind of reverence, not loved but respected, even feared, by those who saw its work. For the Japanese, Okinawa was a nightmare. Survivors described Helldiver raids as endless, hammer blows that flattened positions no matter how deeply dug. A captured soldier confessed, "We mocked their beast." But the beast returned, day after day, until there was nothing left. By June, Okinawa was secured. The cost was staggering, tens of thousands dead on both sides, fleets battered, skies filled with wreckage. Yet the road to Japan lay open. And though atomic bombs would ultimately end the war, it was the relentless hammering of machines like the Helldiver that made invasion possible. Thus ended the combat saga of the beast. It had begun in mockery at Tarawa, stumbled through doubt, and roared in vengeance at Truk, the Marianas, Leyte, and Okinawa. Loved by few, hated by many, but feared by all, it had proven itself a weapon of endurance. When peace came, the Helldiver faded quickly from memory. The Dauntless had glory, the Hellcat had fame, the Mustang had beauty. The beast had only scars. Yet those scars were carved across the Pacific, where once proud empires fell. And in that, its legacy was undeniable. When the smoke of Midway cleared in 1942, the SBD Dauntless stood as the hero of the Pacific. It had cracked the spine of the Japanese fleet in 6 minutes of fire and precision. Pilots loved it, gunners trusted it, and Marines on the ground called it their guardian angel. By every measure of reputation, the Dauntless deserved to fly until war's end. And yet, within the halls of Washington and the drawing boards of Curtiss Aircraft, the decision had already been made. The Dauntless would be replaced. Its successor was the SB2C Helldiver. Why replace a legend? The answer lay in the relentless logic of war. By late 1942, America's industrial might was in full swing. The Navy wanted aircraft with more speed, longer range, and heavier payloads to match the expanding demands of the Pacific. The Dauntless carried a 1,000-pound bomb. Admirals wanted 2,000 pounds. The Dauntless cruised at 250 miles per hour. They demanded closer to 300. And so, the Helldiver was born, not as a graceful refinement, but as a brute force answer to an industrial question. From its inception, however, the Helldiver carried a curse. Development was rushed, designs were compromised, and production began before flaws were resolved. Test pilots reported handling issues. It stalled unpredictably, it was unstable at low speeds, and it was notoriously dangerous to land on carrier decks. One Navy evaluation bluntly concluded, it should never have left the factory. But war allows no waiting. The Navy needed bombers, Curtiss was delivering them, and the fleet had no choice but to accept the beast. Meanwhile, Japanese intelligence scoffed. Reports filtering through their channels described a troubled dive bomber that American crews themselves distrusted. To Japanese aviators who had already mocked the Dauntless, the Helldiver seemed an even easier target. They failed to see the larger truth. America did not need perfect machines. It needed thousands of machines flying every day, carrying ever heavier bombs to shatter island fortresses and convoys. In that role, the beast was fit for purpose. The problem then was not only technical but cultural. Pilots who had flown the Dauntless resented the Helldiver. They had trusted the SBD with their lives. It had carried them through Midway and Guadalcanal. The Helldiver, by contrast, seemed treacherous, its quirks a constant reminder that engineering had rushed ahead of reliability. Veterans scrawled angry notes in reports, nicknamed it son of a bitch second class, and pleaded to keep their dauntless squadrons. Their words fell on deaf ears. Production lines rolled, and by late 1943, the beast began replacing its beloved predecessor. Strategically, the shift reflected America's evolving war aims. The Dauntless had been the weapon of defense, the scalpel that turned the tide at Midway. The Helldiver was the weapon of offense, designed not just to sink carriers but to pound fortresses like Tarawa, Truk, the Marianas, and the Philippines. It was not subtle. It was not elegant. But it could carry the weight of America's advance westward, smashing airfields, convoys, and bunkers with blunt force. The broader problem was perception. Japan continued to underestimate American machines, laughing at the beast as they had laughed at the Dauntless. Within the U.S. Navy, skepticism simmered, sometimes erupting into open frustration. The tension created a paradox. The Helldiver was delivering results on the battlefield, but its reputation among those who flew it remained poisoned. And yet, results mattered more than reputation. At Truk Lagoon, the beast had destroyed dozens of ships. At Leyte Gulf, it had helped sink the giant Musashi. At Okinawa, its bombs silenced kamikaze airfields. The irony was cruel. The plane cursed by its own pilots was feared by its enemies. Its ugliness, both physical and reputational, hid a truth, that it was a weapon of industrial war, built not to inspire but to destroy. The larger issue then was psychological. The Helldiver's story was not just about an airplane. It was about the collision between wartime necessity and human trust. The Navy needed the beast, pilots hated it, Japan mocked it, and yet it performed the role demanded of it. In that tension lies the true significance of the Helldiver. Ultimately, the SB2C was less about glory than about inevitability. It replaced the Dauntless not because it was better loved, but because America's war machine demanded a bomber that could carry more, fly farther, and saturate targets. The decision was industrial, not sentimental. And in the cold calculus of war, sentiment was a luxury no empire could afford. Thus the Helldiver entered history not as a legend, but as a paradox. Mocked, mistrusted, and yet undeniably effective. A beast in name, in form, and in memory, proof that sometimes victory belongs not to the loved but to the endured. The SB2C Helldiver was never elegant. From the moment it rolled onto carrier decks, it looked heavy, almost overgrown, as if engineers had taken the Dauntless and fed it steroids. And in many ways that was exactly the point. The Navy wanted bigger bombs, longer range, and faster speeds. The result was a machine built for brute force, not finesse. Dive bombing was still its heart. Like the Dauntless before it, the Helldiver attacked by plunging steeply, nose down, bomb bay doors yawning open. At 70 degrees, sometimes closer to vertical, the pilot rode gravity into the target. The difference lay in scale. Where the Dauntless carried a single 1,000-pound bomb beneath its belly, the Helldiver could haul double that, up to 2,000 pounds, plus additional rockets under its wings. A dive from a Helldiver was not just a scalpel strike, it was a hammer blow. Technically, the Helldiver pushed its frame to the limit. Its Wright R2600 engine produced 1,900 horsepower, giving it a top speed of 295 miles per hour, faster than the Dauntless but still slower than many fighters. Its wingspan measured 49 feet, longer than its predecessor, and its internal bomb bay allowed for cleaner aerodynamics in level flight. In theory, it was a significant upgrade. In practice, the story was messier. The Helldiver's handling was notoriously poor at low speeds. Pilots complained of sluggish controls, unpredictable stalls, and a tendency to drop a wing during carrier landings. Many crashes occurred not in battle but on approach, where the beast seemed determined to buck its rider. Compared to the Dauntless, steady, predictable, almost forgiving, the Helldiver felt treacherous. Yet when it worked, it was devastating. Its dive brakes, larger and stronger than those on the SBD, allowed controlled descents at high speed. Pilots described the sound as a metallic shriek, harsher even than the Dauntless, a howl that seemed to announce judgment. In those terrifying moments, when the horizon vanished and the ocean tilted into a wall of blue, the Helldiver felt alive. Consider its payload flexibility. It could carry a 2,000-pound bomb in the bay or two 1,000-pound bombs, or a mix of depth charges for anti-submarine work. Rockets under the wings added to its punch. Where the Dauntless had been almost purely a ship killer, the Helldiver became a multi-role destroyer. Carriers, cruisers, transports, even fortified caves on Okinawa all fell to its dives. The crew dynamic also shifted. Like the Dauntless, it carried 2 men, pilot and rear gunner. But the Helldiver's gunner operated twin .30 caliber machine guns on a power-operated mount, giving more defensive bite. Later versions replaced these with heavier .50 calibers. The pilot also had forward-firing guns for strafing. Together they gave the Helldiver teeth beyond its bombs. Still, the flaws could not be ignored. Carrier operations were unforgiving, and the Helldiver's size made it harder to handle on deck. Its folding wings helped, but its bulk strained elevators and hangars. Maintenance crews cursed its complexity. One Navy chief mechanic joked bitterly, "Every bolt fights you. It's called the Beast because you have to wrestle it even on the ground." And yet, the Navy pressed on. By 1944, production lines in America were turning out Helldivers by the thousands. The machine might not have inspired love, but it delivered firepower at a scale no Dauntless could match. In the war of attrition, that mattered more than elegance. Comparing the two reveals the trade-off. The Dauntless was steady, nimble for a bomber, beloved by its crews. The Helldiver was faster, carried more, but was hated by pilots for its quirks. And yet, history did not ask which was more loved. It asked which could shatter more targets, more quickly, across an ocean-wide battlefield. In that test, the Beast delivered. Perhaps the best way to understand the Helldiver is to picture its dive not as art but as industrial violence. The Dauntless was a duelist's blade. The Helldiver was a sledgehammer swung by a giant. Both could kill, but one killed with precision, the other with brute inevitability. The irony is sharp. Japan laughed at both, mocking their bulk and their slowness. Yet it was precisely that bulk, those bomb bays, that rugged frame, that turned island fortresses into rubble. In the end, the Beast was not designed to be beautiful. It was designed to be enough. To understand the SB2C Helldiver, it must be placed beside its peers. The Dauntless it replaced, the Avenger it fought alongside, and the Zero that tried to kill it. Only then does the paradox of the Beast become clear. The Dauntless had earned immortality at Midway. It was stable in a dive, forgiving to fly, and small enough for carrier decks. Pilots trusted it the way a soldier trusts his rifle, reliable, familiar, and deadly in skilled hands. Its drawback was payload. One 1,000-pound bomb was often not enough to sink heavily armored warships or crack concrete fortifications. By 1943, the Navy wanted more. The Helldiver gave them that. With its 2,000-pound bomb bay rockets and upgraded armament, it dwarfed the Dauntless in destructive power. But it came at a price. The controls were heavier, the stall behavior treacherous, and landing speeds higher. Pilots joked bitterly, "The Dauntless carried you home. The Helldiver tried to throw you out." In combat, however, its payload made the difference. Where the Dauntless might scar a cruiser, the Helldiver could cripple it. Where the Dauntless cracked a bunker, the Helldiver obliterated it. The Avenger, meanwhile, was the Navy's torpedo bomber, a larger, 3-man aircraft with longer range and greater versatility. It carried torpedoes or depth charges, hunting ships and submarines alike. Compared to the Helldiver, the Avenger was steadier and less despised, but slower in the dive. The two often flew together, Avengers at wave-top level, Helldivers plummeting from the sky. It was a complementary partnership, hammer and anvil, sky and sea. Then there was the Zero, Japan's legendary fighter. In 1942, it had danced rings around American planes. But by 1944, with Hellcats dominating the skies, the Zero struggled. Against the Helldiver, its speed and agility were still dangerous. Many Helldivers fell to Zero attacks, especially when caught without escort. Yet the beast was tougher than it looked. Its armored cockpit, self-sealing fuel tanks, and heavy defensive guns gave it a survivability edge. Gunners raked approaching fighters with .30s or .50s, often enough to deter or destroy them. A Zero might outmaneuver the Helldiver, but could not always outlast it. Technically, the Helldiver's design reflected the brutal math of late war strategy. It was not built for elegance, it was built for mass production. Curtiss engineers cut corners under pressure, leaving quirks unsolved. The Navy complained, but factories kept producing. By the war's end, over 7,000 Helldivers had been built. Numbers, not perfection, were the priority. And numbers told their own story. At Truk, Leyte, and Okinawa, Helldivers delivered thousands of tons of bombs that shaped the battlefield. The Dauntless could never have kept pace with that scale. In this sense, the beast was not a successor in spirit but in logistics. It was what the war machine demanded. Yet perception lagged behind performance. Pilots distrusted it, mechanics cursed it, and veterans remembered it with mixed emotions. The Dauntless inspired affection. The Helldiver inspired reluctant respect. Its reputation never recovered, even as its bomb craters dotted every major battlefield of the Central Pacific. The contrast with Japanese views is telling. Enemy pilots mocked its looks but feared its dives. Enemy soldiers cursed its bombs, calling them the voice of doom. In Japanese diaries, descriptions of Helldiver raids were vivid. The beast screams from the sky. We fire, but it dives and dives until the earth itself shatters. In their eyes, its ugliness was not weakness but terror. The paradox of the Helldiver lies here. Loved by none but useful to all. It embodied America's industrial war, a machine born of necessity, mass-produced despite flaws, effective because it was relentless. Against the elegance of the Zero, it was brute force. Against the grace of the Dauntless, it was raw power. Against the precision of the Avenger, it was destructive scale. In the end, the beast was not a legend like the Dauntless. It was a reminder that in total war, perfection is unnecessary. Survivability, payload, and sheer numbers win. The Helldiver was the epitome of that lesson. Ungainly, mistrusted, but undeniably decisive. And that is why, though history remembers it with mixed tones, the beast's shadow still falls across the Pacific. It is the proof that sometimes victory does not wear the face of beauty, but the face of necessity. History often remembers machines by their reputations rather than their results. The SB2C Helldiver is a perfect example. A weapon cursed by its own side, mocked by its enemies, and yet essential in the final act of the Pacific War. To understand its contradictions, we must compare it against the aircraft around it and the expectations it failed or perhaps refused to meet. The Dauntless was the Helldiver's ghost. Every pilot who strapped into the beast remembered the SBD, its steady controls, its forgiving dive, its triumph at Midway. The Dauntless was the plane you trusted, the friend you followed into fire. The Helldiver was the stranger you feared might betray you. Side by side, the Dauntless looked elegant in its simplicity. The Helldiver looked swollen, complicated, dangerous even before leaving the deck. This comparison poisoned its reputation from the start. And yet, the Dauntless could not carry the war westward forever. Its payload was too small, its range too short. The Helldiver, ungainly though it was, could carry double the bombs. It could strike fortresses and convoys with a force the Dauntless could never muster. The irony is sharp. The very traits that made the Helldiver despised, its bulk, its heavy handling, were the traits that allowed it to shatter late war defenses. The Avenger too shaped perceptions. As a torpedo bomber, it was larger, slower, and carried a crew of 3. Crews often compared it favorably to the Helldiver, more stable, less treacherous, easier to land. But the Avenger was a complement, not a replacement. It hunted ships with torpedoes, it prowled for submarines, but it could not dive with the precision of a bomber. In joint missions, Avengers crippled targets while Helldivers finished them. The contrast showed a truth often ignored. Different machines served different roles. Comparing them was less about better or worse than about balance. Against enemy aircraft, the Helldiver was always measured against the Zero. Japanese pilots, clinging to memories of 1942, believed their agile fighters could swat down any American bomber. And in one-on-one combat, the Helldiver was clumsy prey. But war was no longer fought on even terms. By 1944, Hellcats dominated the skies, clearing paths for Helldivers to dive unopposed. In this new balance, the beast did not need agility. It needed payload. Japan's mistake was laughing at a bomber while underestimating the industrial juggernaut behind it. The first great mistake then was Japanese arrogance. By mocking the Helldiver, they repeated their error with the Dauntless. They believed appearance equaled capability, that ugliness equaled weakness. At Truk, the Marianas, and Leyte Gulf, they learned that payload mattered more than grace. Their miscalculation was not just tactical, it was existential. The second mistake was American impatience. The Navy demanded a replacement before the design was ready. Curtiss rushed production, and the result was a machine that carried flaws into combat. Early models were underpowered, plagued with mechanical problems, and loathed by pilots. Instead of delaying to refine it, the Navy accepted mediocrity in exchange for numbers. It was a calculated gamble. Enough bombers now, even if imperfect, rather than perfect bombers too late. The gamble worked, but at a cost in lives and trust. The third mistake was perception itself. Pilots and mechanics judged the Helldiver by how it felt rather than what it achieved. They compared it endlessly to the Dauntless, a machine it was never meant to imitate. In their eyes, every quirk was betrayal. In reality, the Helldiver was not designed to inspire affection. It was designed to crush resistance. The misalignment between expectation and purpose created a reputation that clung to it long after the war. Yet behind every mistake was an unshakable truth: the Helldiver worked. It sank ships, cracked fortresses, and silenced airfields. It was not graceful, but it was effective. Its flaws were real, pilots died because of them, but its victories were undeniable. In the ledger of war, results mattered more than affection. Comparisons, then, reveal the heart of the paradox. The Dauntless was beloved but limited. The Avenger was steady but specialized. The Helldiver was flawed but powerful. And together they formed the triad that carried America across the Pacific. None alone could have achieved victory. Altogether they forged it. The greatest irony is that the Helldiver's reputation never recovered, even as it contributed to decisive battles. In post-war memory, the Dauntless was celebrated, the Hellcat admired, the Mustang glorified. The Helldiver was remembered mostly by curses muttered on carrier decks. Yet history shows a harsher truth. America did not need love. It needed bombs, ships sunk, and fortresses destroyed. The beast delivered all three. And so, the mistakes of perception, Japanese arrogance, American impatience, pilot resentment, are part of its story. They remind us that war machines are judged not only by what they do but by how they feel to those who ride them. The Helldiver felt like a traitor but acted like a hammer. It was hated, but it was necessary. The beast, in the end, teaches a sobering lesson. Beauty is irrelevant in war. Only destruction counts. The Dauntless won a battle, the Helldiver won a campaign. Japan mocked both. Only one empire survived. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the Helldiver did not receive a hero's farewell. There were no grand parades for it, no songs sung in its honor, no monuments raised in its likeness. While the Mustang soared into legend, the B-17 became immortal in memory, and the Dauntless held its place in history books. The SB2C Helldiver slipped quietly into the shadows. It was remembered less as a savior than as a necessary evil, the beast that got the job done. And yet, its consequences were vast. The beast shaped the Pacific War's final years in ways that were undeniable, even if uncelebrated it. For veterans, the Helldiver was an object of contradiction. Many pilots spoke of it with bitterness, recalling the dangers of its handling, the accidents on carrier decks, the moments when a stall nearly killed them before combat even began. A Navy pilot later wrote in his memoir, "It was the only aircraft that tried to kill me before the enemy did." Mechanics cursed its complexity, remembering endless hours wrestling with bolts, wires, and hydraulic systems. For them, the Helldiver was not a legend. It was labor and fear. But for Marines on the ground, the memory was different. They did not see the cockpit struggles or the technical flaws. They saw only the results: bombs falling on Japanese bunkers, fire sweeping airfields, convoys shattered in lagoons. To those trapped under Japanese fire, the beast was salvation. A Marine who fought at Okinawa recalled, "We hated the kamikaze by night. But when the Helldivers came by day, we knew we could breathe." The cultural memory reflects this divide. In American history books, the Dauntless occupies the pages of Midway, a battle that symbolized the turning of the tide. The Helldiver, though it played decisive roles at Truk, the Marianas, Leyte, and Okinawa, never became iconic. Why? Because memory favors the dramatic, not the industrial. Midway was a duel of fate. Truk and Leyte were industrial hammer blows. People remember miracles, not inevitabilities. This selective memory shaped how generations came to view the Helldiver. In museums, pristine Dauntless sit polished under bright lights. A handful of Helldivers remain too, often battered, sometimes restored, but never drawing the same awe. Even aviation enthusiasts sometimes dismiss it as a flawed design, a necessary misstep on the way to better planes. Yet this dismissal ignores a critical truth: the beast helped shorten the war. Its bombs sank ships too large for the Dauntless, cracked fortresses too thick for artillery, and suppressed airfields that fed Japan's kamikaze nightmare. The irony is profound. Japan mocked it, American pilots cursed it, history ignored it, and yet it accomplished its mission. In some ways, this is the very essence of industrial war. Machines are not judged by beauty or affection, but by their ability to deliver destruction at scale. By that measure, the Helldiver was a quiet victor. Its long-term impact extended beyond the Pacific. The lessons of the Helldiver shaped post-war aviation philosophy. The Navy realized that rushing an aircraft into service before resolving design flaws created unnecessary risks. Pilots' mistrust could erode morale even when results were achieved. At the same time, strategists recognized the value of payload and range over pilot comfort. Future designs balanced both. Aircraft had to inspire trust and deliver power. The beast taught that imbalance in either direction could scar a machine's legacy. In Japan, the memory of the Helldiver was different. Survivors described it as terrifying. Its dives seemed endless, its bombs inescapable. For soldiers dug into caves, its scream was worse than artillery, the promise of precision death from above. In diaries recovered after Okinawa, one Japanese soldier wrote, "The beast came every morning. We prayed for rain, for clouds, for anything to hide us. But the sky was always clear and the beast never tired." For them, the Helldiver was not ugly, it was merciless. After the war, the Helldiver was quickly retired. Jet technology was already reshaping aviation, and carrier decks now prepared for faster, sleeker aircraft. By 1947, the beast was gone from frontline service. Many were scrapped, some sold for parts, a few left to rot in forgotten corners of airfields. It faded not just from memory but from existence. Today, only a handful survive, painstakingly restored by enthusiasts who recognize its role. The absence of glory, however, does not erase significance. The Helldiver's story remains a cautionary tale about war machines and the people who build and fly them. It reminds us that reputations can diverge sharply from results, that what is mocked in one era can be decisive in another, and that the true cost of victory often lies not in the machines that are loved, but in those that are endured. The larger, lasting influence of the Helldiver lies in the way it shaped America's industrial war strategy. It proved that the United States could afford to push flawed designs into mass production, absorb the difficulties, and still overwhelm the enemy. It showed that perfection was not required when numbers, logistics, and persistence could carry the day. This philosophy, quantity and reliability over elegance, remained a cornerstone of American military production for decades. Culturally, its legacy is quieter but no less real. Among veterans' reunions, stories of the beast were told with wry humor. Crews would shake their heads, laugh bitterly about its quirks, and then fall silent when remembering the missions where it carried them home, or didn't. For them, the Helldiver was not a legend, but a ghost, haunting memory with both gratitude and resentment. In the end, the Helldiver's long-term effect is one of paradox. It was hated but necessary, mocked but decisive, forgotten but essential. Its story warns us against equating fame with importance. Some heroes are celebrated, others are endured. The beast belongs to the second category, a hero in spite of itself. Perhaps that is why, decades later, when the few surviving Helldivers roar their engines at air shows, veterans weep quietly. They do not cheer as they do for Mustangs or Corsairs. Instead, they remember the weight of bombs, the scream of dives, the smell of oil and fear. They remember the beast as it truly was, flawed, frightening, but theirs. And in that, its legacy endures. The SB2C Helldiver never became a legend. It was cursed, mistrusted, and even hated by the men who flew it. Pilots joked that it tried to kill them before the enemy could. Mechanics swore at its bolts and wires. Commanders worried over its flaws. And yet, through every curse, through every doubt, the beast did exactly what it was built to do. It carried America across the last, bloodiest miles of the Pacific War. Its story is not about perfection. It is about necessity. The Dauntless was beloved because it felt steady in the pilot's hands, because it won midway with elegance. The Helldiver was despised because it felt treacherous, because it lacked beauty. But history does not ask which machine was loved. It asks which machine delivered. And the beast delivered with bombs, with fire, with relentless dives that shattered fortresses and sank giants like Musashi. The lesson is clear. In war, arrogance kills. Japan mocked the Dauntless and paid at Midway. They mocked the Helldiver and paid at Truk, Leyte, and Okinawa. To laugh at an ugly machine is to misunderstand the nature of war. Power is not always graceful, and victory does not always arrive in beautiful form. Sometimes it comes in the roar of a beast that no one wanted but everyone needed. For America, the Helldiver became a symbol, not of glory but of endurance. It showed that flawed machines, mass-produced, flown with courage, could still topple an empire. It reminded us that trust is earned not by how a weapon feels, but by what it achieves. And it left behind a sobering truth. History remembers legends, but it is often the uncelebrated workhorses that actually win wars. So as we close this story, remember the beast not for its flaws, but for its results. Remember that victory is not always graceful, and that arrogance is always dangerous. The Helldiver teaches us that strength can be ugly but decisive. If you found this journey as revealing as we have, subscribe to our channel for more untold stories of history's machines and the people who lived them. Share this film with others who want to understand not just the myths of war, but its gritty realities. Because in the end, the scream of the Helldiver dive reminds us all, even the most mocked machines can change the world.